there's always something between risk and reward. And so one has to determine, well, what's the reward that's really feeding my motivation here? And does that outweigh the risk? Just being involved in any kind of performance arena. You want something to go a certain way, and if it doesn't, then that image or thought is just out there. It either becomes the elusive thing that you're chasing after, or it becomes that judgmental thing that's being, foisted on you. There's no way that a person involved in sports can be a loner and excel and get to whatever higher heights and levels they want to alone. It just doesn't happen.
My senior year in high school was a roller coaster. The spring semester of my junior year, we didn't have a head football coach. So no one was staging workouts for us. So we as the athletes decided to stage workouts for our own selves to make sure we stayed in shape. And while we were doing that with no head coach the entire off season, we started putting together our own workouts for each other, going over plays ourselves. We even staged together some money and found camps for us to go to as a team to make sure we stayed together. And while I was in those camps with my other friends and other teammates, I started realizing a bunch of different coaches were looking at me. A bunch of different Division I colleges. And suddenly we get a head coach and the season gets started, and all those coaches that were asking about me had suddenly disappeared. And I was confused on what was happening. So I ended up finding a school to go to by just happily walking down the hallway. And I happened to see him when I was walking to class. No one called me up or anything. And they were telling me they were trying to recruit me. And that's where I went to go play for a few years at Winston-Salem State. Then I transferred to North Carolina A&T. And when I walked into the office, the head coach came and greeted me as if he knew who I was. I come to find out that they were trying to recruit me. There were actually quite a few different schools that were trying to recruit me. I just wasn't told about them, which was pretty heartbreaking. And the reasoning for them not talking to me anymore was that when they called up or when they sent the letters, they were told I'd already picked a school. And I picked that school because I didn't know I had options. Options. The one thing that every athlete feels as though they don't have. And when reality comes and hits us, it can send us spiraling. Sometimes that reality is our childhood traumas. Sometimes that reality is the fact we won't get to the level that we previously assumed we would. Sometimes that reality is just that we hit our peak and it's time to hang it up. And when reality does hit, we start to realize we need something different. And suddenly we begin to try to reshape our identity. And that's hard to follow through with, especially when you're looked at as a deity amongst people who can't do what you do. Balance, however, is the key. And that's something that sports psychologist Dr. Michelle Deering is trying to restore back to the athletes that she treats. Balance is hard to find, but sometimes that requires distance from the situation in order to gain perspective. And once we do that, we can become whole again.
I'm both clinical and sports psychologist. Clinical has to do with just straight up working with folks around issues of mental health issues, such as depression, anxiety, on one end of the spectrum all the way to the far end of the spectrum, which would be the schizophrenia. And so a sports psychologist is someone who actually focuses more on performance for those who are either in the athletic realm or the artistic performance realm, any kind of performance.
When it comes to performance, like what are some of the issues that you've seen when it comes to performance?
It's run the gamut from people who have what they call the yips, where things just aren't flowing, whether it's mechanically with their body or just in their actual projection of themselves, say as like a dancer or things of that nature, to the other extreme where people who have been injured, and that injury happened a certain way, so that when they're in the process of recuperating and they have to go back into their performance realm, whatever that arena is, they might have some hesitancy. Within the realm of psychology, you can actually approach things from what they call a cognitive behavioral framework, where you're looking at what was the person thinking that then affected their behavior at certain times. There are branches of that, and the other branch that I work through is a more holistic body approach, mind-body approach, where I'm utilizing a mode of therapy called eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is just the coined term for EMDR therapy. What I do is I use the framework of that therapy to help someone have their right and left brain help them get desensitized to what it is that caused that injury. It's more metabolizing it, like making it part of you, so that you're becoming whole again internally. Something that I read, I'm forgetting which book I read it in, but it was it made me realize that you can go ahead and practice movement, all right? But if it's not the most efficient movement for your body type and whatnot, you're gonna find yourself just practicing that movement and then find yourself in a game situation where it won't work, or you won't be able to make the adjustment because you don't know what the proper efficient movement is for your body type. Practice makes perfect? No, perfect practice makes perfect.
Do you find that coaches sometimes have a hard time adjusting to that, knowing that like they were taught a certain thing, but the player is just completely different?
Yes, and just as an example, I was recently talking with a parent who is a coach for their young person's league, and one of the things that, as I was listening to him, he was asking me for my input, but he wasn't listening to it, which was here he has all these players, but there's one in particular that wasn't responding in a game situation the way that he needed them to. It didn't sound like he was making the effort or seeing the necessity to make an adjustment in his approach with that player, as opposed to standing back and just labeling that player as, well, they're the weak link. Okay. Whereas Popovich, the kinds who are like the Popovichs and the Belichicks, they have somehow figured out how to connect with each person individually.
What have you noticed are some of the psychological tolls that being an athlete just has on a person?
There's burnout, okay. And that's not, and I think that can happen both at a physical level and at a mental level. And it really is determined by how much balance you have in your life, because one of the things I've found is when someone goes from recreational athletics to, okay, now they're playing for the travel team, to now they're playing at the high school level, now they're, jump the grade, and now if they're at D1 level, and then they're jumping the professional level. Each of those phases requires an amount of balance. You might want to give your body a rest, whether it's do another sport, do another season, or find other things to engage, not just your mind, but your body, and not just your mind, body, but your personal interests. All those other things are what round them out, which will help them later on should they get injured and their identity now is not as an athlete, or should they, age out and now they have to figure out what's their next phase of life.
Do you find that sometimes, even when it comes down to like parenting and stuff like that, like keeping children inside of one sport the whole entire life just makes them want to go, I'm done?
Yes, and actually we see that a lot with young ladies in sports. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the parenting that has taken place beforehand, which is why I've been developing a course to start teaching moms how to be moms with their daughters who happen to be athletes. Thinking of a past client who the dad he grew up in the sport, that his daughter was in, but he was very laid back about it and recognized that she needed to develop on her own and take ownership for her sport, whereas her mom was the hen-pecking mom kind of thing who was always on her about everything. When the daughter got injured, that sent the dynamics in the family awry. But what the daughter figured out was, and what I saw her figure out was, there was a way in which she was able to become in touch with her emotions because of her dad.
For a long time, athletes were looked at as these gladiators who just like continue to fight. And you find that athletes have a hard time adjusting back to society.
And it's interesting you phrased it that way. We started off with the gladiator theme, because I think about like even just military veterans. You know, they're in the battle the whole time. There's an adrenaline rush to it. There's this heightened whatever, and then they come back and try to reacclimate to regular society. Same thing with athletes. They are in the battle. They put their bodies through, have to give up so much to become good at their craft. And they're in an arena that caters to them, because we as a society, I think, cater to those who are not able to do what we normal folks can do, and we elevate them. So there's this we're not worthy kind of thing. And then that feeds a person's ego.
How do you believe athletes are able to like ride that balance of being human around a society that doesn't view you almost as human, because you can't do it, because you can't do what you can do?
I think the one thing that an athlete can do that will help them, not just in the immediate time, but in the future, is really figure out who you want to surround yourself with. Whatever inner circle, just make sure that those folks are the ones who are going to tell you the truth about yourself and keep you humble. You have to have appropriate boundaries around who you're going to give access to your mind and who you're going to give access to your heart.
Do you find that the mental health aspect is just something that's the millennial generation is just now starting to wake up to it? Or has it always kind of been something that you in your field, people in the, not even just sports psychology, but just psychology and therapy field in general, have been trying to bring more light to? During
a period of time, probably like maybe 20, 25 years ago, there was a trend of there was a trend within college counseling centers where they were seeing that students were coming in to college with more severe mental health issues. It wasn't that they would get to college and, oh, they're stressed out, and whoa, they're really stressed out. Oh my God, we need to hospitalize them. Okay, they were coming in, whoa, we need to hospitalize, kind of thing. And I think that kind of, from where my vantage point was, that kind of just started the ball rolling, where they started seeing that college students needed more. Fast forward maybe 10 years, so that would make it like maybe 10 years ago. I think the trend now within the NCAA, which is this huge behemoth of an organization, has started to see that, okay, student athletes are actually students first, and those student athletes have issues that are now impacting their ability to play. That's kind of converging with the NFL, which is the other big behemoth, them realizing, hey, you know about all the domestic violence stuff that's come out. Whoa, we got people with issues. Well, the issues have always been there. It just hasn't been highlighted.
If you could pass down anything to like this millennial generation or generations after, whether it's athletes or anyone who's dealing with all kinds of stuff, what would it be?
You're not alone. I really want someone to know they're not by themselves in this. That whatever it is that they're feeling, it's a feeling. It won't always be like that. And then the third, and I mentioned it last because it's the most important, is please reach out and ask for help, because it's there at your fingertips. If you're thinking that your life's not worth something and you want to end it, there's a line out there, suicide hotline, there's hope. If you feel like the situation won't change that you're in, just reach out to tell someone I need help. Your local community mental health center is there. If you need to just walk into a hospital and just say, who can I talk to about X? There's help. Place of worship, there's help. There's help. Please reach out for help.